Pacific, good afternoon Europe, and good morning America. Welcome to the Genesis Expo, our monthly showcase on our low-code application platform. I'm Felipe Oliveira, Head of Sales and Marketing, and I'm delighted you can join us as we share with you how the Genesis LCAP is transforming financial markets IT delivery. I'm joined today by my special guest, Mark Beeston, founder and managing partner of Illuminate Financial, sharing an investor's perspective on how low-code addresses some of the biggest challenges in financial markets. We open our show with an update from CEO and co-founder Stephen Murphy, looking back on some of the highlights of 2020 and exploring our plans for Genesis going into 2021. Ray Chi, Head of Solutions Delivery, joined us from London to give an overview of how the Genesis LCAP works and explore the 6-step process involved in building applications. And we close the session with James McLeod, Director of Community at Finos, and Nick Kolba, Global Head of Platform for Genesis. They'll discuss the latest developments in open source and set our expectation for open source in the coming year. We conclude the show with a live audience Q&A. Financial market firms face a challenging, constantly changing environment. We help firms adapt, innovate, and transform their business and operating models, making it possible to do more with less code in less time. To get us underway, I'd like to hand over to Stephen Murphy for a company update.
Thanks, Felipe, and as always, thanks to everyone who's joining us for the Low Code Expo, whether live or on demand. With the end of 2020 coming up soon, we would like to wish everyone a happy and a very safe holiday season. This is our 6th Low Code Expo. We're joined today by leading voices across the markets. Welcome to Mark Beeston, founder of Illuminate Financial, a venture capital firm specializing in financial markets, and also participated in our Series A investment round. Mark is also a board member at Genesis, and I'm really excited to have him on our show today. We're also joined by James McLeod, Director of Community at Finos, the Fintech open source foundation who champion and facilitate open source software standards across the financial markets. Genesis are a proud and active member of Finos. We leverage a variety of open source technologies within our platform and contribute to Finos through the FDC3 initiative. Thanks to both Mark and James for joining us on today's Low Code Expo event. Today, I want to talk about the concept of no code versus low code, build versus buy, and finally, our 2021 plans around hiring to support our growth and also partnering with strategic consulting firms. When we discuss no code and low code with other clients, we see them as complementary to one another, not versus one another, with different potential target users and use cases. No code enables a new range of developers and engineers, sometimes called citizen developers. Today, Genesis is a low-code platform. Today, we already have some no-code tooling and a roadmap that will deliver complete no-code tooling into our platform in 2021. As mentioned in prior Expo events, our platform was built to implement complex and core systems unlike the other no-code and low-code cross-industry platform providers. With our combined no-code and low-code strategy, we will allow engineers and developers the choice to work with both the no-code and the low-code platform tools. And Genesis remains the only no-code, low-code platform dedicated to the financial markets. The platform has been built to support the requirements of the financial markets. We've published a great white paper that details the specific needs required for our industry. Check out our website for a download. As some of you may have seen in the recent press release with B3, we are very excited to have B3 as a client and a partner. We successfully completed a very thorough POC with B3 earlier this year across a variety of complex workflows, all of which were very latency and performance sensitive. Now B3 are using the Genesis low-code platform to transform the way they develop software and they support their business. On a personal note, I'm delighted to have B3 as a client and to continue our growth in Latin America. Okay, now let's discuss build versus buy. Throughout my career working in different banks, there was always the challenge of whether to build the required solution from scratch or buy an off-the-shelf product. Both of them had pros and cons. One of the main reasons we built the Genesis low-code platform was so our clients could get today what we always wanted back then, but was never available. A true technology partner who understood our markets and could provide a low-code platform that would allow us the choice to both buy and to build. Although not yet public on our website, there is a complete financial markets industry application library being built with key strategic clients and partners. This ranges from applications in the asset management and wealth management parts of the industry, all the way through to prime brokerage and clearinghouses. We are looking forward to sharing with you more of this exciting development in the new year. There is also a growing range of out-the-box financial markets business components within the Genesis low-code application platform, also again being built with our clients and our partners. And finally, the last point I would like to discuss is how we are supporting our growth in 2021. We'll be hiring across different areas of the company and locations around the world, primarily in the platform engineering team and the sales and account management teams as well. This will include new geographical locations, and a new area of expansion will be Asia Pacific. So that leaves me to once again wish everyone a very safe and happy holidays, along with a happy new year. We truly appreciate the continued support and participate in today's Low Code Expo event. I look forward to seeing you all in 2021. Back over to you, London, Felipe.
Thank you, Stephen, for highlighting some of our achievements from 2020 and giving us an update on what we can look forward to next year. If anyone would like to chat about any of the items mentioned with Stephen and the team, please get in touch. Also, if you have any questions, please submit them now in the on-screen form and we'll cover them in our live Q&A later in the show. Now, I would like to hand over to Ray Chi for our upload section, giving us a recap of how the Genesis LCAP works and taking us through the 6 steps for building new applications.
Hi, my name is Ray Chi and I'm Head of Solutions Delivery at Genesis Global. In the last Expo, my colleague Shruti Agarwal did a terrific job of explaining a very important part of working with Genesis to go from an idea to a delivered solution in class-leading time to market. Shruti explained all of the key aspects we consider to ensure we have a good and shared understanding of the client requirements, so we start the build process knowing what success looks like. If you were not able to join the previous Expo, I do recommend you take a few moments to watch the recording, which is available on the Genesis website. Today I would like to pick up where that session left off and explain more about the build process that follows. As with the previous session, I will primarily focus on a custom solution situation rather than deploying a ready-built product, so that you can see all of the elements that may be part of a project. You may recall from previous sessions that the Genesis LCAP comprises a number of logical layers. There's the microservices-based application infrastructure layer, which provides the core architecture and development building blocks common to and underpinning all highly resilient, performant, and scalable financial markets applications. Then there is the business component layer, where building blocks that perform business functionality, such as adapters, for example, for FIX, Pershing, Murex, or Bloomberg TOMS integration, or for standard data model elements, modeling a wide range of different financial markets instruments, or for common business functions for trade and transaction workflows, life cycle events, calculations, or aggregations. The building blocks can be selected and plugged together as appropriate for the particular client requirements. Finally, there's the tooling, whether it's building new solutions, supporting the DevOps pipeline, or monitoring the production infrastructure. The Genesis LCAP provides a complete set of tools for the entire lifecycle. A couple of examples of Genesis DevOps tools, Console and Gem, were featured in the November Expo. One way we like to help visualize the Genesis LCAP capabilities and development process is to think of it as being like Lego bricks for building robust, high-performance, custom financial market systems in a fraction of the time of traditional development approaches. The core platform components and technical components plug together to provide the microservices-based application infrastructure, while the straight out-of-the-box business components or any newly required custom components plug together to provide the business component layer. As I mentioned, the previous Expo covered in some detail the discovery and design phases, really getting a good shared understanding between Genesis and the client of the problem to be solved or the opportunity to be realized. Of course, in practice, there are many cases where the picture evolves considerably as the project progresses, and our agile approach is designed to offer a great deal of in-flight flexibility. We try to make sure that as many key success criteria are identified and agreed upfront to help ensure our design decisions are optimal from the start. But today we are focusing on the actual development and build process. So let's take a look at what's involved with a typical build. You may recall from the previous session that the design phase comprises 6 topics. As was mentioned, there's a high degree of overlap and a natural transition from the design to the development activity. So the 6 steps of development focus map efficiently to the analysis already gathered. The data model, any integration requirements, core business events, any data analytics, specific data distribution requirements, and the user interface. It's probably helpful to think of these more like 6 ingredients than 6 steps, as rather than a sequential process, we organize our build in this way to further accelerate the time to market by enabling much greater parallel delivery across all 6 functional areas. Let's take a closer look at the engine of a typical Genesis application, the server side. Every Genesis application will have core infrastructure or system-level microservices and functional or application-level microservices. The application-level microservices are made to fit the specific client requirements in one of 3 ways. They may be immediately suitable out of the box from the Genesis Business Component Library, so no code, or they may offer a range of capabilities and behaviors that can be configured to implement the specific requirements using metadata and configuration using the Genesis Platform Abstraction Language, GPAL, so low code. Or finally, they may be custom implemented, typically in Java, Groovy, or R as appropriate, pro code. This approach offers maximum acceleration of delivery while ensuring the finished solution is both optimally fit for the specific client needs without compromise, while retaining the key elements of performance, scalability, and robustness. So let's walk through a typical build. We start with a blank canvas with just the basic elements as placeholders. While much of the process can subsequently progress in parallel, we always start with the data model. It does make sense to start with the data, as that informs all the other processes. With the wide range of financial market solutions already built using Genesis, the out-of-the-box data model can likely meet many or most of the needs of any new system, and that would be the standard approach, extending it as necessary to support any additional required new data model elements if needed. Now there is some magic that happens at this point. This is completely automated. You don't have to do anything. A building block called Product Gen will create a skeleton application just from the schema metadata. It puts in place all the system building blocks on the server side that are common to all Genesis platform applications, and then adds event handlers pre-configured to update your business objects and to distribute all of your data to the front ends. Once the data model and skeleton application have been created, we can look at the other key elements, such as integration. Not only is there a set of protocol adapter building blocks for any custom integration required, there is also a selection of ready-built interface adapters for the more common financial industry vendor applications and data sources. Just select the components you want and apply any additional data mapping that is required. Next, the required business events and logic are defined. Starting from the skeleton created from Product Gen, we can tailor additional specific logic. There's an ever-extending set of out-of-the-box business library components to call for common functions, and of course any new custom building blocks can also be added. Additional metadata configuration defines user roles and entitlements to determine which user groups can perform these operations. Often there are requirements for analytics of some kind, and this could simply be about consolidating data, applying simple calculations, for which the platform provides out-of-the-box metadata-driven tools for rapid build and configuration, or for adding more complex and sophisticated routines and models via custom pro code. The next set of services makes the server-side data available to user front ends and any interactive APIs. There are both publish or push and request-reply building blocks ready to go, depending on the requirement. These blocks were already pre-configured using the data model metadata, including joins, but additional display-specific logic can be added here, including determining which user groups can see specific data entities. The user interface web components and capabilities were covered in a previous expo in some detail by my colleague Nick Kolber. And if you missed that session, I really recommend catching it on the recording available on the Genesis website. This step of the build is all about designing and configuring the required Genesis web components to create an intuitive and ergonomic front end to allow users to interact with the system and server-side processes. If you have watched any of the previous expos, you'll have seen several examples of user interfaces built with Genesis technology. such as this example of the Genesis Automated Quoting System product. And that is the system built and ready to test and deploy. From your initial idea to a successfully delivered system 80% faster than traditional software delivery projects. Before I hand you back to Felipe, I just wanted to show this worked illustration of the actual building blocks of one of the real-world client applications that we built in exactly this manner. This particular example is the Genesis credit insurance application that was showcased by my colleague Darren Newby during a previous expo, and the video of that session is also available on the website. Hopefully you can see how the various ingredients we've talked about today come together to rapidly create real-world solutions to your specific system requirements. All that remains is for me to thank you for your time. I hope this session has helped you gain further insight both into the Genesis LCAP build process and how Genesis technology might be able to help you build the systems you need better and faster. Thank you. Back over to you, Felipe.
Thank you, Ray. Again, if any audience members would like to chat with Ray or the rest of the team, please do get in touch. Also, if you have any questions, please submit them on the form on screen and we'll cover them in our live Q&A. We now come to the download section of the show, where we invite an industry expert to discuss the challenges and opportunities from across the market. So I'm delighted to be joined today by Mark Beeson, founder of Illuminate Financial, who's also an investor into Genesis. Mark, hello, how are you?
I'm very good. Thank you very well. Thank you for having me here. It's great to be here.
It's a pleasure having you with us, Mark. Mark, just for our audience, would you mind just introducing yourself and just introducing Illuminate Financial?
Sure. Well, so I'm the managing partner and founder of Illuminate Financial Management. We're a purely financial markets technology focused venture investor, typically investing at late seed and Series A stages. We work really closely with the industry. Our investors include organizations such as Deutsche Börse and IHS Markit, and we have partnerships with a number of banks, and we're really active in helping the companies that we invest in come to market. My own background covers derivatives trading at Deutsche Bank, entrepreneurship, launching a trade processing business that we sold to Intercontinental Exchange, and I ran the post-trade business at ICAP before establishing Illuminate 7 years ago.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark, for that introduction. Mark has an amazing team with a diverse background from McKinsey, from people who've been 13 years in fixed income, as Mark Whitcroft, for example, even ex-central bankers like Rezo, for instance, and people from backgrounds in Australia, like Catherine, so on and so forth. So it's a really diverse set of skills and backgrounds and skill sets. So I just wanted to give that extra flavor for the audience. Mark, thank you so much again for being here today. You just highlighted to us that one of the missions or objectives within Illuminate is to help back firms who are helping solve problems in financial markets. So how is low code helping solve problems in financial markets? Could you give us your take and your views on that?
Yeah, sure. And it might be slightly contrarian to start by saying, like, for us, we don't start by saying low code. In fact, when we invest, we don't go to technology first, we go to problem first, right? So what's the problem facing the financial markets industry? Well, so firstly, following the credit crisis, we had a massive change in the macro operating environment. So we saw huge industry deleveraging, we saw massive multi-jurisdictional regulation, and we saw an industry effectively walk into a zero tolerance compliance environment. To me, that actually led to me establishing Illuminate, because what that meant was we had an industry that had been built on an old generation of infrastructure, typically on-premise, installed type solutions, that had driven this massive 30 to 40 year expansion of financial services that we can largely tie to sort of the development of the modern microprocessor. And that was no longer fit for purpose, right? There were a whole set of emerging needs around cost, obviously, around control, around compliance, and around capital that needed to be addressed, right? And so that's our whole reason to exist. Now we swing that back to Genesis. What Genesis is doing is actually providing a way to develop really rapid and really fit for purpose, native to financial markets technology solutions. And actually, I've described it in this way before. Genesis is almost our investment thesis rendered as a single company. There's almost nothing that they can't do. And it's important to remember this is a sector that spends more money on technology than any other industrial sector apart from the technology sector, right? So when we talk about a generational refresh of technology needing to happen because of a set of business drivers rather than pure technology drivers, the market opportunity there is enormous. But it's an industry that historically has bought very, very large, complex products. It's an industry that has tried to build very large, a complex product, and history is littered with the failures of those types of programs, right? And I think Genesis is a framework on which you can either build very rapid fit for purpose solutions of your own, or you can buy solutions off the shelf, or you can partner with them to develop the solutions that you need. And that's a really, really beautiful proposition in a world that really needs solutions but can't afford to fail to deliver anymore.
Mark, that's an excellent and super concise explanation. And if you allow me to just pick on some things, just for the sake of the audience as well, you said something which is really interesting, which is focusing on problems. Just for the audience's sake, one of the portfolio companies in Illuminate, RegTech, was actually exited last year to Bloomberg. And you mentioned, I think Illuminate was one of the anchor investors only 2 years before that with Deutsche Börse in the Series A into that business. So tremendous success story. We addressed the problem, and then the company got acquired by Bloomberg into a wider enterprise offering to solve for industry challenges in financial markets. And this goes back to, I think, what you're alluding to in terms of the tectonic changes that we've seen since the deleveraging periods of 2008. I actually remember very vividly, I was a trader back then, living in New York City, and I remember when the whole market came down, and since then we've seen tremendous amount of change. And to your point, I think Genesis has tried to address a lot of these changes with agility, flexibility, scalability in a performant, secure platform. One of the things that I'd like to pick on, Mark, you mentioned, Genesis being native to financial markets. Obviously, there are other LCAPs in the marketplace, and I'm sure Illuminate has had a chance at investing or looking at other platforms as well. What made Genesis, why did you decide to invest into Genesis specifically when you had other options, and what made it special? What kind of resonated with you from an investor perspective?
Yeah, so I think that answer, a part of it kind of lies with how we approach the world, which might be slightly different to how other investors approach the world, and therefore, the fit of Genesis for us at that stage. So as I said, we are not about technology for technology's sake, right? In fact, I annoy my team all the time by saying we're not really a technology investor, which is funny, of course, because everything that we invest in is technology. But what I mean is, we don't wake up thinking about AI. We don't wake up thinking about blockchain. We wake up thinking about anti-money laundering. We wake up thinking about delivery versus payment challenges, or collateral management, or fixed income electronification. And of course, we wake up thinking about the challenge of agile technology delivery against a myriad of problems. And so, when we came across Genesis, it wasn't that we were looking for a low-code investment, right? There are certainly plenty of investors out there that are looking for low-code investments. But what we were looking for was, a solution that we thought would meet the needs that we were hearing from our very, very broad industry network, around some of their own delivery challenges. And the way that we invest is, we meet these companies. If we think they're interesting and they're interested, then we'll say, hey, why don't we connect you into our network, whether that's the formal network or the informal network. And I think one of the great success stories there actually would be Genesis's own relationship with Citi. Where we introduced Genesis to Citi very early on in our dialogue before we actually even wrote the check. Citi have ended up becoming a significant user and actually an investor in the firm. It's that positive reinforcement of our network against the opportunity in front of us that gives us the confidence to invest, and importantly, the confidence that our network can actually also bring value to Genesis, right? And it's not just about technology; it's about having technology that's fit for purpose. And because the team at Genesis, their core DNA is financial markets, in the same way that our core DNA is financial markets. When it comes to delivering something that's fit for purpose, they just get it in a way that nobody else, is naturally going to.
Mark, that's excellent, and that's a really important message that I really appreciate you dialing up in our conversation, because our position is precisely as the LCAP that is native to financial markets, precisely for the reasons you've just explained. One of the things, the other points would be interesting for us to touch about, you mentioned that you start your investment process by thinking of what problems needs to be addressed and who's in a position to address these problems, and then you go into the technology and the landscape and the enterprise offering, and so on and so forth. One of your other portfolio companies, Privatar, obviously recently had a very successful Series C round, which was anchored by Warburg Pincus and had Excel. It had, for example, Salesforce Ventures as well as an investor into that round. We just saw a couple of days ago that Salesforce just bought Slack, which is kind of like a messaging platform into another low-code platform. Do you foresee that that's going to happen? More consolidation will happen within the low-code space, and specifically, where do you see Genesis' position in that space?
So I think Genesis' positioning is pretty interesting. I would say that from our investment point of view, we view ourselves as investing in two types of technology. So very much sort of fintech for financial markets as vertical industry serving technologies. Cloud margin, it's collateral management, it's an industry focused solution. We also invest in enterprise technology that targets financial markets, and Privatar as a data privacy solution was much more in that bucket. And the two buckets have some similarities. One of them being, do we believe that we can help them come to market? But slightly different characteristics in other ways, which probably we don't have time to kind of go into here. I think Genesis sits in a very interesting space because it's, as we've said, it's financially native, but I think it's on the very outside edge of the vertical industry serving category, right? There's a massive opportunity because this is a huge technology buying sector, and that's great and that's really exciting. But I think in the long term, if I'm a Series B or a Series C investor, the potential for Genesis actually is probably not dissimilar to the potential for a Privatar. It's as applicable to any other, really, really critical, high demand, high frequency, or highly regulated environment. But I think that's about tomorrow. It's all about today. I think, if we look at what's kind of going on in 2020, the size of the opportunity in front of Genesis in financial markets is only getting bigger.
Couldn't agree more, Mark. Thank you for those words, and thank you as well for being so supportive to Genesis. One of the ethos I think around working with Illuminate has been also about the network that you've introduced, which is connecting us to the right people at the right time in the right company, and that has been a tremendous help for us with Citibank and obviously many other clients as well that we're speaking to, and has contributed to our success this year. Despite all the challenging market environment, still seeing a very high growth year for Genesis. So thank you for that. Mark, if I may now shift a little bit the conversation into forward-looking kind of insights into where do you see the industry going. We've seen tremendous growth in data, cloud, open source, interoperability. What's your vision in terms of, from a technology standpoint? Where does the common denominators come together in terms of all these different platforms and offerings? Do they, we just saw a big M&A happening as well with IHS Markit recently. We have Bloomberg, we have Symphony, we have all these platforms and all these amazing, technologies that bring forth solutions. Where do you see the market going? Do you see the market just, data just continue to grow as an asset? And do you see these platforms kind of evolving into something different, or just kind of, just expanding their reach and their ability to solve problems?
So I think there's a couple of questions there, right? One's a sort of market structure question, and then the other is technology. So I think kind of addressing the technology piece first. I think we'd be remiss to have any conversation without kind of talking to what has happened in 2020 and what the implications are, right? And we set Illuminate up in response to 5 years post the financial crisis, seeing a need for technology change, right? But it is a simple fact that the highly regulated world of institutional financial markets are by and large much slower to adopt cutting edge technology than we are as consumers, as an example. So the technology journey isn't so much about like looking over the horizon and saying, okay, quantum computing is coming, how is that going to change the world? This is an industry sector that talks a good game about technology, but it's still only in the foothills of its cloud migration, of its big data migration, of its AI adoption journey. And so I think Genesis, built as it is, on a series of sort of best-in-class microservices, is very well placed to both help organizations accelerate through that journey, but also to future-proof them through that journey as well. So we've all spent all year worrying about what the new normal is, right? We don't know what the new normal is, but what we do know is that the future of BCP is me sat here in my study and somebody else sat in their kitchen and somebody else sat in their dining room. It's not a lukewarm office in New Jersey or the Midlands, or South London. So that itself, COVID is an accelerant of that change in terms of cloud migration, because if you're going to have a 100% distributed workforce, you need fit for purpose tools, and the fit for purpose tools are not 35-year-old systems that are running on a mainframe in your basement, right? So that's the first part. I think the Market deal that you make reference to is interesting. Market is a company that I was on the board of nearly 20 years ago, and they're actually an investor and partner of ours, and it's the culmination of an incredibly exciting journey. When Market itself IPO'd, a couple of years ago, $5-6 billion IPO, it was actually already a conglomeration of a number of smaller companies, right? And this is very much certainly the vertical element that we invest in. It's absolutely a industry M&A driven exit landscape. Most of these companies are not on IPO journeys. They're going to get taken out by an industry acquirer along the way. And to us as an investor, that's super exciting. And actually this deal, it's the largest deal of 2020, kind of shows you that, A, there are lots of acquirers, and B, they're really not constrained on how big those tickets can ultimately be. So I think it's a really, really exciting time to be an entrepreneur. It's an exciting time to be an investor.
Mark, I couldn't agree more, and I think that's in your own words, super exciting. I think the possibilities are endless, and I think as we grow and as we evolve into this accelerated world of technology getting into our lives, I think more opportunities like that will most definitely come by. Mark, one other point I'd like to touch on with you is one of the ethos with Illuminate Financial is being so supportive to the portfolio companies and to the management of the companies and to the teams. Is there anything coming next year that will be different, or is there anything that excites you particularly about 2021 or is the focus going to be on continuing the journey with the companies that currently sit in the portfolio?
Good question. I mean, so we're just closing, doing the final close of our second fund. We've been investing out of that since last year. Genesis, for what it's worth, is one of the latter companies in the first fund. We've now made 6 investments from the second fund. We've announced 5 of them. There are a couple of interesting themes coming. Cloud migration is definitely a focus for us. Data in all its forms remains a really exciting focus for us. We've made our first distributed ledger investment, our first blockchain custody, crypto custody investment, and we've announced our first ESG investment at all. So again, lots of exciting new developments, but our core remains very, very simple. We invest where we think we can help the companies come to market, and we believe that we know that there is a market need for those services, and we will just continue doing more of that.
Fantastic, Mark. Thank you so much for sharing your vision and your insights. We're running out of time, so I'm going to ask you just two messages. One message to the Genesis teams, and one message to the other companies out there who aspire to have a supportive investor like Illuminate.
Well, I think to the Genesis team, I would actually just say, look, congratulations. I think you guys have knocked it out of the park in 2020. It's been a really, really challenging year. It's been fascinating in the time that we've been involved to really watch the company kind of evolve from, initially much more of a kind of consultative business to a much more, product centric business. And the company just matures and matures, and it's really fantastic to watch and be a part of, to the extent that we are able. I think to everybody else, we're going to get to the other side. Change is happening in markets. Change is always exciting. I'm excited for the future, even as we sit here just kind of coming out of lockdown and still worrying about some of the macro challenges ahead.
Mark, thank you so much for that beautiful message. We are delighted to have you as an investor into Genesis, and we look forward to continuing the great work together. Thank you for giving us some of your time today, and I look forward to seeing you again digitally or physically when the opportunity presents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark, for your insights. To find out more about Illuminate Financial, please get in touch or head to illuminatefinancial.com. Now I'm joined by James McLeod from Finos and Nick Kolba from Genesis to explore the opportunities for open source collaboration in 2021 and how Genesis works with Finos as a partner to make important contributions to the open source community. So before we jump into the discussion, let's take a look at a quick video explaining Finos.
The Fintech Open Source Foundation, Finos, is an independent non-profit organization whose purpose is to accelerate collaboration and innovation in financial services through the adoption of open source software, standards, and best practices. Financial organizations that adopt open source software and standards are best positioned to grow in an ever-evolving technological landscape. Finos is helping to make that happen. Finos is a diverse community of banks, fintechs, and technology companies with over 35 corporate and associate members, driving over 35 projects and special interest groups from an open source community of over 350 contributors. Finos also co-hosts the Open Source Strategy Forum with Linux Foundation, the only open source conference solely focused on financial services and regulated industries, with the last OSSF held in November 2020. Head to www.finos.org to get involved, or go straight to Finos on GitHub to start leveraging and contributing to Finos projects at github.com/Finos.
Welcome back to the studio. Hello, James. Would you like to say hello to your audience?
Hi, Felipe. It's great to be here. I'm James McLeod, Director of Community at Finos.
And Nick, would you like to say hello to our audience as well, please?
Absolutely. Thanks, Felipe, and hello, everyone. It's great to be here.
Both of you, I'm delighted to have you on the show. Thank you so much for giving us your time. First, I'd like to turn to you, James, if that's all right. We just watched a video on Finos. You've had an extraordinary year this year. Lots of activities happen. Linus Foundation, OSSF. You've got over 30 member institutions. Lots of exciting key projects happening. Can you give our audience a little bit of an overview on who the members are? What are some of the key projects that happened this last 12 months? And just a little bit of a flavor on 2020.
Yeah, of course. So 2020 has been a very exciting year for Finos. So obviously, everybody's had their difficulties this year, but we're able to be in an open source foundation and also being distributed globally. We're able to pivot fast, and face into the pandemic and also show all of our various members and contributors, how we can actually work as distributed teams. So really, the biggest call out for the past 12 months was Finos joining the Linux Foundation, which means that we are actually a foundation within, a bigger open source foundation that includes the CNCF plus, other technology projects that people will be aware of across the cloud and, DevOps, plus other software engineering environments as well. We also kicked off our RegTech initiative. And we expanded our ecosystem and partnerships with various different associate memberships, such as the Alliance for Innovative Regulations and Interworks Alliance. Plus, we've also started working with the EDM Council as part of cloud service certification as well. Not only that, but as part of the Linux Foundation and also as part of Finos, we've really stepped into APAC. So being part of the broader Linux Foundation means that we have a global reach now. We've had a big reach, across the US and also Europe since, the foundation was actually founded. But now as part of the Linux Foundation, we're working with the Linux Foundation APAC team. Plus, we've also just kicked off our very own Finos meetup, which is being driven out of Sydney in Australia, but also has, a reach into APAC and, different Asian countries around that area. And not only that, we've had lots of projects being contributed into the foundation, such as Legend from Goldman Sachs and Glue from EPAM. And we've also got some great projects on the horizon for the future as well.
That's really exciting, James. What a year. And I'm actually really pleased actually to see the whole Asia Pac expansion on the back of the Linux Foundation coming alive as well. We actually announced recently a partnership with another Finos member, which is Symphony, which is also, I understand, doing a lot of work on open source and collaboration in that space. So what a year! Congratulations! It's really exciting.
Thank you very much. And I was pleased to see Symphony members at the APAC meetup as well. And so we certainly do belong to a global community of fintech open source contributors.
Really exciting. And James, do you foresee that the membership and the contributions to kind of keep growing now that we've got all these accomplishments and more kind of backing and covering more regions? What's kind of your thoughts on where this is heading?
Yeah, so even though we've been, in a pandemic and people were, wondering what that would mean to all global businesses, we're pleased to welcome members such as Intel and Accenture and SUSE into the foundation. And so all we see is global growth as fintech open source. And we've also got, various different projects in the pipeline, such as so in 2020, we created special interest groups, which basically bring communities together across the horizontal of fintech. And so we have our DevOps mutualization special interest group, which is formed. And we also have our regulation special interest group that's formed. But we're hoping moving into the future, we'll have a special interest group around inner source as well, which is part of, another global community, which is how we collaborate on the inside of banks, as well as, collaborating on as open source teams across the outside of banks in the open source environment as well. And so lots of very exciting things on the horizon for 2021.
It certainly sounds really exciting, and I think bringing this cohesion between all the different stakeholders and members into the industry, into the community, is really truly amazing. So congratulations for
Thank you.
Spectacular 2020.
And all done from our back offices in our houses as well, which is all part of, open source and, being part of a distributed community. It's amazing what you can do with technology and the right type of culture.
Really exciting. Before turning over to you, Nick, I'd like to show a quick video on Genesis' contribution with FTC3 into Finos. So let's take it away to the video.
The Genesis LCAP web components and micro UIs really come alive when interoperability is added to the mix. Underlying successful interop standards, as well as successful web strategy, is an open source ecosystem. Genesis is a contributing member of the Finos Foundation and dedicated to open source development. Unlike many low-code, no-code platforms that mandate a black box around their technology, Genesis believes that the best of low-code comes with open platforms. Genesis contributes to Finos, which drives financial open source projects and standards. Finos is also part of the Linux Foundation, which hosts many open source projects critical to financial applications, including Node, Electron, and Kubernetes. Through cutting-edge web technologies such as web components and financial standards like FTC3, the Genesis LCAP provides a new way to create micro UI-driven applications in finance.
Welcome back to the studio. Nick, I'd like to now turn to you. Would you be so kind to take us through some of the projects that Genesis contributed into Finos and maybe take us through maybe FTC3, which is a project that you've been heavily involved in?
Yeah, absolutely, Felipe. I mean, obviously, there's FTC3, then also we're involved with Symphony, which we've been integrating into our platform, as well as we've been involved with Financial Objects project, which is deeply linked to FTC3, and that's about standardizing financial object data models across the industry. Those are picked up by FTC3 and used to allow applications to interact on an end user's desktop. Definitely the area we've been most focused on is FTC3. And the value for us at Genesis is really around Genesis being a platform that really allows the rapid creation of very rich applications, and FTC3 being a standard and technology set that then allows those applications to interoperate in very rich and deep ways when they're put onto an end user's desktop. And that can be either Genesis applications interoperating with each other, or Genesis built applications interoperating with third-party or second-party apps that are there in the end user system.
That's super exciting, Nick. So it's about interoperability, it's about connecting, it's about creating industry standards, and ultimately delivering better applications faster and in a performant and connected way into the industry. And what's one of the immediate benefits that on the Genesis side from contributing to Finos that our clients or our collaborators would see from this engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a really important thing about Finos and what Finos has done in the industry is shifting the financial industry, which has been working with open source for quite some time, from primarily consumers of open source to contributors of open source that are engaged with each other in building things like standards of FTC3, which has been picked up by a really significant number of banks and other data vendors across the industry, or things, projects like Legend that James spoke about earlier, that's been led by Goldman Sachs, but you have a slew of other banks and vendors getting involved with that. So in this shift from being just consumers of open source to contributors, what we're seeing is a greater level of engagement across the industry around open source. And what that's been great for companies like Genesis, because it gives us really a forum for us to become deeply engaged with our customers in a meaningful way around the technology we're building, and getting a better understanding of the technology they're building, and really understanding how that's cutting across the whole industry.
Absolutely. I mean, this is all about innovation, right? And the digital transformation with contribution from the community, driving everyone together across industry standards. It sounds really exciting. I'm really excited with the Symphony partnership that was recently announced, Nick. So thank you. If I may turn back over to James now. So Nick is obviously a familiar face to you. He's one of our absolute rock stars on the Genesis side, contributing to the Finos projects alongside yourself and the other colleagues and members. So what's next? What lies ahead in 2021, James, for Finos? What are the exciting projects? What are some of the objectives and some of the milestones that we can look forward to in 2021?
Yeah, so that's actually a really good question to ask, Felipe. So at the end of 2020, we've actually seen within the way that we actually measure all of our data and all of our contributors into the foundation, a real kind of acceleration of contributions that are coming in at the developer level. So fair enough, we have very many projects that get contributed in, from our members. But it's really good to see that, engineers and developers and the people who, write the code and raise the pull requests, and get involved in the projects are really starting to gravitate towards Finos projects from within the financial services industry. Now, if you think about Fintech or probably, kind of the bigger banks, open source was actually something that was pretty much restricted or even frowned upon at some point. For some of those banks to even partake in. But now we're at the point where we're seeing a lot more contribution coming in and, a lot more activity actually, being advocated by those banks who were once, against either consuming or contributing into an open source environment. So what I see for 2021 is a continuation of that upshot of contributions. And what that means is that when more people partake in open source, you get like a richer set of code, but then you also get a richer set of points of view, which means that we're going to see a lot more efficiency, within engineering in finance, because there'll be lots of different points of views from across the industry, which is one of the great, benefits of lots of people collaborating together. And so when people actually collaborate and come together and, join projects from within the foundation, you get a lot of learning that actually happens from team to team, and so within our special interest groups that we formed, what we've actually found is that people are starting to align to the way that problems and solutions are being articulated. And so that might sound like, something that we take for granted, but the fact that, banks are coming together to talk about the problems that they're having inside their banks in order to collaborate and actually form solutions, and that coming together around a common language just means that, collaboration, efficiency, driving open source solutions, between not only the banks, but also the regulators, and not only engineering, but also policymakers as well, such as the EDM Council and the EDMC. All I can say is within Finos, where we've been having contributions of individual projects from our members, there's going to be a greater alignment between different industries and also between different non-profit organizations and foundations as well. Plus, all of our projects are going to learn how to, kind of exist and also drive themselves as well. So Finos has been a great enabler of Finos projects, and we've, been coaching a new kind of way of collaborating from within the industry. In 2021, I see our project teams, knowing how to do this for themselves, and it almost becoming part of the DNA of the engineering culture in finance, where teams and engineers just know how to collaborate rather than having to ask or, having to ask permission. So I see 2021 being a great accelerator. But also, as vaccines and, different ways of, managing COVID come onto the horizon, we're also going to be encouraging and coaching people back into the open as well, so physically. So all of our meetups, which we've been coordinating from within the foundation, which have been online, we're going to start engaging with those within the local regions and following local health advice. so we're not going to stipulate that people meet in person, but we're going to slowly kind of give people confidence to come back together and meet in person as and when, the time is right. And so we see that maybe happening, in the second half, towards the back end of 2021, which will hopefully mean that we will have a physical open source strategy forum, whereas this year's was virtual. And we may even look at, the hybrid model of events and also conferences as well. So a very exciting time ahead for us and everybody within the Finos community.
That's excellent, James. Thank you so much for that summary. And I couldn't agree more that the power of collaboration and the cohesion that Finos is bringing to the industry by, as you positioned yourself, by bringing the contributors together to build solutions that will change financial markets and address some of the big challenges that we all face is truly amazing. So thank you very much for that. And just a call out to Nick's work as well, which is incredible. We've seen in some of the past expos the micro UIs, the web components of the open source tool and the interoperability of the front-end solutions that Genesis is building under Nick's leadership. So Nick, just like to open to you. Would you like to make any final remarks?
No, I'm just like James, I'm really excited about what's to come in 2021. In open source and finance, I think we've made incredible strides in 2020. And also just kind of echo his observation that the way that open source communities and development works has made us very resilient in this time when things have become remote. As somebody who's developed in open source for probably about a decade now, I found it quite easy and comfortable to switch to a completely remote environment. And we've adopted many of those practices inside of Genesis to make us more resilient in this time, those kinds of inner source practices. And I think that it's just going to make the tech industry and finance even stronger going into 2021 as things start to relax and go back to some sort of something resembling more of normalcy, but I think it's going to be an exciting time.
Excellent, Nick. Thank you so much for your insights, and let's go on that journey together with our clients, with our contributors, with our collaborators, and certainly with Finos as well. So Nick and James, I want to thank you so much for the insights and wish you both a tremendous end of year and a very strong start to 2021. And I hope to see you both in person or if not, digitally soon. Thank you so much. If you'd like to know more about Finos and their work in open source, please get in touch at any time or head to finos.org. So before we head over to the live Q&A, I would like to thank you for joining our expo, our monthly update on the Genesis OutCap and how we are transforming IT delivery. Check out our previous show with Brad Levy, President and Chief Commercial Officer of Symphony, discussing the changing nature of financial markets and the impact that technology is having on collaboration across the industry. And now for our live Q&A. Hello, folks, and welcome back to the Expo. I'm delighted to be here once again, joined by Mark Beeston, founder and managing partner at Illuminate Financial. I hope you've enjoyed the show this far. Now we go into our Q&A section, and just wanted to say hello to Mark. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Felipe. How are you doing?
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here with us today once again. And now let's get into the Q&A section. So first question coming in here is, COVID was mentioned as an accelerant of change in 2020. What are some of the implications to the industry going into 2021, but also 5 to 10 years out? Mark, do you want to take that one?
Okay. Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that's a dissertation in its own right. I think as I mentioned previously, we've all been searching for that new normal, and we all don't know what that new normal is. But we know that business continuity is no longer redundant buildings. And one of the things that we tell all of our investments, every pipeline company that comes through the door, in an ideal world, you want to be 3 months ahead of a problem, not 3 years ahead of a problem. And frankly, we might apply that even to ourselves at Illuminate, right? I think when we first set up the first fund, which we launched in 2015, we knew that change was required because of those other factors that I talked about: the cost, control, capital, compliance. Obviously, always a competitive advantage as well. But I think we were ahead of the problem, right? As I say, as consumers, we use these devices. It's all big data driven, it's all AI enabled, and it's all cloud native, and these regulated organizations have been rightly so, to some extent, slow adopters of that. The implications of COVID, however, are a whole series of new challenges, right? Imagine a scenario where the head of trading of one major bank is sat at one end of the dining table, and her husband, who's the head of relative value sales for another major bank, is sat at the other end of the dining table, right? It's a whole new array of trade surveillance and compliance challenges that need to go beyond the relatively controlled environment of the trading floor, post-trade processes that need to go beyond having everybody working in the same bullpen, to being able to remotely manage a staff that you could have 5,000 developers working for you in 5,000 different locations, right? And a cloud native and cloud enabled toolkit is definitely a place to start. So I think it really starts with an acceleration of the adoption of some things that we largely take for granted in our consumer lives, but are really core foundational layers for that next generation of market infrastructure that we're going to do digitization 2.0 of our industry upon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mark. And also, actually, even to bring up one of the points I think we talked about in our discussion, which I thought was really spot on, which is the fact that we'll probably need solutions to maximize the available desktop space as well. For instance, as the example you just gave on the traders, for instance, trading from home, on their setups from the office, they'll have 5, 6, 7, 8 screens, and then I guess from home it'll be a different setup, and they'll need solutions and applications to deliver that. So absolutely, it's spot on what you've just shared with us. And Mark, just to on the second part of the question as well, do you foresee that we're going to have like 100% distributed workforce 5-10 years from now? Is that going to be? Do you see that as being the new normal, or do you envision that this is going to be still a very much undetermined space? Too early to call at this stage in time.
I think it's too early to call, except to say I don't think we're fully going back to what it was. I think it's going to be a hybrid of what we've seen. And I think, ironically, there's a sort of inversion of the attitudes of the workforce, right? I mean, I'm nearly 50, perhaps slightly old guard, definitely, very used to kind of going into an office. Used to walk past the Hoxton Hotel and kind of go, why are these people in an office? The younger team members that work for me, and the younger team members that work for all of us, I think have suddenly started to really understand that the office actually as a social hub and a point of human contact was massively undervalued before. So ironically, I think there's an awful lot of the older generation of senior managers that go, oh wow, this is a great opportunity to save the entire cost base of our office by turning everybody's living room into our office. And the reality is actually the younger team members actually crave that social interaction, which actually, by the way, I think is also key, obviously from a business point of view. I think if you're a young, innovative company, or frankly, if you are a genuinely innovative company of any age, right, a lot of that spark of innovation and opportunity is really coming from those moments of spontaneous interaction that are just quite hard to replicate in a virtual world.
Thank you, Mark, and absolutely, I think it's very interesting. Actually, there's a human element as well, a human-centered element on the technology side as well, which is brilliant. Thank you for bringing that new perspective as well into the question, into the answer. Sorry, not the question. So actually, that leads nicely into the second question that came in, which is We've seen an increased collaboration in the industry being championed by Finos, for example, and as such as the recently announced Genesis Symphony partnership. Do you envision this collaboration accelerating in 2021 with the increased adoption of cloud?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I mean, again, we talked about it when we spoke earlier about, a lot of the end game actually is industry consolidation at the highest levels, and we saw that with the S&P market deal at, I guess, at the highest level, biggest deal of this year announced. The whole microservices playbook is finally the sort of the technology dream of true interoperability kind of being rendered in a useful toolkit form, and obviously the natural extension of that and the promise of that wholesale industry cloud migration, which I think is really only just starting in a meaningful way, is the actual ability for companies and products from different companies to truly interoperate and create much larger, holistic, best-in-class solutions. And that is a really exciting thing that we're going to see rendered before us over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And actually, that reminds me of in one of the other expos, we actually looked and cited one of the numbers of the astonishing growth in cloud business by some of the cloud providers, growing 17-20%, and these are big numbers, and making billion-dollar investments into new infrastructure to support that growth that's happening in the industry. So that's absolutely spot on. And actually, one interesting point to make, you mentioned the S&P and the IHS market deal, but also even the Salesforce acquisition of Slack, which is also an LCAP business, not in financial markets per se, but also coming together with another messaging platform. So that's absolutely spot on. So thank you, Mark, for that perspective. Let's go for the next question here. Is Mark, you've mentioned Genesis stands as your investment thesis rendered as a company, and there's nothing they can't do. Could you expand on the back of the buy and build paradigm in the industry referenced by Stephen?
Yeah, sure. So that's a good question. Whoever asked that. Look. I mean, people won't necessarily know this, but I started out as a trader. I spent the first 13 years of my life at Deutsche Bank, and then moved to be COO of their two largest trading businesses, the global rates and global credit business. So I'm no stranger to the rollout of these, multi-million dollar programs, be they the front office risk systems, the Calypsos, the Murexes, the Summits as was of the world, or be they the internal build programs that compete with those, right? And there are, as Stephen said, there are benefits to both, but I think as a technology industry, we've kind of moved over the last decade to more agile deliveries, which takes away some of the risk of the delivery of those large solutions. But the simple reality is that to be used as a mission critical system in this space, there's a certain amount of functionality that you have to deliver, which makes the project a certain size, right? Now, the Lego component of solutions like Genesis that actually allow you to very quickly select and stitch together core components are really accelerating those timelines to get to that critical mass of business functionality to make both a usable product be rendered faster, but also dramatically cutting the delivery risk. And it's funny, I actually introduced Stephen on Monday of this week to the CIO of a very large division of an investment bank, and that CIO turned around and said, "Oh, I don't know about low code. What I do know is that I've got 5,000 developers I need to get more code out of, right?" And that's the actually really amazing collaborative win-win opportunity that Genesis represents to me.
No, fantastic. And I couldn't be more excited about what's to come next year on the back of what Stephen also mentioned on the low code, no code. But I'm gonna save the best for the early next year to share with the audience. Also, just to remind everyone, as Stephen mentioned, we have a paper on the buy and or build paradigm available on our website. I'd like to welcome and invite you to read the paper, and we'd love to hear any feedback from you guys. Mark, I think we have time for one last question. So if we look here, let's see. So Mark, could you share your thoughts around where financial market participants are in the digital transformation journey, alluding to the buy side, sell side, and on the market infrastructure side? What's the differences between the different participants, and where do you see them in that journey, and where are the biggest opportunities in 2021?
Wow, someone's really trying to press my buttons with that one. So firstly, let me start by saying there's a lot of nonsense spoken about innovation and digitization journeys in our space, right? So let's remember this, right? The whole expansion of financial services that everybody is currently enjoying the benefits of was built on the first wave of digitization. So everybody's talking about digitization like it's a new thing. It's not a new thing. We're in the foothills of a journey, but that journey is digitization 2.0. It's moving away from the expansion of financial services based on the initial wave of the modern adoption of the microprocessor, but in a installed on-premise way, and into these next generations of technology, right? So we're already digital, right? We're just re-architecting for a new macro operating paradigm, of what markets are like post the financial crisis and potentially post COVID as well. It's a super exciting journey. These are not fast. They're not the fastest adopters in the world, but the technology toolkit is one that actually is going to help that acceleration. So it's super exciting. This industry spends more money on technology than any other industry apart from tech, and an awful lot of that is on run the institution on both sides, both the sell side and the buy side. And so the opportunity to re-architect, to drive efficiency, to drive control, and to maintain compliance in a world of ever expanding compliance needs is a very exciting one, and I'm absolutely pumped for it.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. And actually, on the back of that, I think your answer was perfect, because if you look at actually the clients we've been working with, actually they're across the spectrum. Actually, this morning we announced that there's a press release on B3, another infrastructure provider, one of the second largest exchange by market value in the world, and the biggest one in Latin America. So to your point, I think the opportunity is across financial markets and not specific to any of the segments within financial markets. So brilliant answer. Thank you, Mark. I think we've run out of time, so I want to turn over to you, Mark, just for any closing remarks or anything additional you'd like to relay into our audience, and any forthcoming messages around 2021.
So sure. I mean, I'll just reiterate what I said earlier, right? I mean, it's been fantastic to be a part of Genesis over the last couple of years. A really amazing journey. None of us saw what 2020 was going to be. We're coming to the end of 2020. The vaccine program has started. We're not out of the woods yet, but there is a world on the other side where we can meet people in their offices and have a beer and plan great things together rather than just doing it over Zoom. So hold in there. There's an exciting future, and it's not just about microservices and low code. Humanity is coming back as well, which is really exciting.
Absolutely. Mark, I wanted to thank you for giving us your time, for all the support you've given us as an investor, as the thought leader in the industry, and thank you so much from all of us at Genesis. Thank you to our audience for staying with us throughout the year, And we look forward to continuing in January, where we're already planning the next expo with some really exciting content. And we look forward to working with you. Please do get in touch if you are a financial market participant. We'd love to work with you and to hear from you and help you. So thank you so much for everyone for joining us today, and have a Merry Christmas and a wonderful New Year's. Thank you.